Hello, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to this online conference on consumer protection in the digital age. I'm Melinda Crane, and on behalf of our hosts and co-organizers, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and the German Federal Ministry of Justice and Consumer Protection, it is a great pleasure and honor to accompany you as moderator today and tomorrow. Today's event is the second in a series exploring how we can ensure a safer, more transparent, and accountable online environment for consumers by enabling them to control their own data and to gain access to legal remedies when transactions go wrong. As you know, our topic couldn't be more timely. COVID-19 has fast-forwarded digitalization in a multitude of areas, including especially e-commerce. That's the upside. The downside is that over the past 20 months, we have also seen a rise in unfair business practices and disinformation online. And that presents crucial challenges which we want to address in this conference. By providing a forum for all of you, whether you come from government, academia, business, or are simply an interested citizen, to share experiences and best practices. We'll hear more in a moment from our hosts. But first, let me say just a brief word about how you, dear ladies and gentlemen, can participate in our discussions. All registered participants are invited to send brief comments via our chat function. You should see the chat window on the right side of your screens of this streaming platform. You may also submit questions through the question window that is just below that chat function. And I will be passing on those questions to our speakers later on in the proceedings. We are also very eager to get your opinion, ladies and gentlemen, and for that purpose, we will take audience polls from time to time. I'd like to do just a very quick test of our polling tool for that purpose. You will now see our multiple choice question on the right side of your screens, just below the chat, and I will read off the question, and then I'd like to ask you to please choose one option and click on it. So here's our question. From what location are you connecting to the online conference? And our answers are A, from the office, B, from home, C, on the road, train, bus, taxi, car, D, cafe, restaurant, and E, a place which must not be named, as Harry Potter might have said. So please do vote now, and we'll get a quick look at those results. And still some votes coming in. Just going to give this a moment of time. Interestingly enough, we are seeing that the majority of you are still in, I presume, home offices or simply at home. Not quite the end of the day yet in Asia, but getting there. So looks like the votes are pretty much all in. We see nearly 61% saying they're connecting from home and just under 40% saying they're connecting from the office. And apparently no one is in a place which should not be named, so I guess that's good. Finally, dear ladies and gentlemen, and especially dear speakers, I would like to just give you a very gentle reminder about timekeeping. We have an exciting but also quite a dense program over the next 2 days, so I would be very grateful if you would please keep your remarks within the allotted time that we have agreed on. And now, let us get started, and we begin with opening remarks from ASEAN. It's an honor to give the floor to the Secretary General of Malaysia's Ministry of Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs, His Excellency Datuk Seri Haji Hasno Zamzam bin Haji Ahmad. You have the floor. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Ms. Melinda Crane, Mr. Christian Castro, State Secretary, the German Federal Ministry of Justice and Consumer Protection, or BMJV, Mr. Louis Teck Heong, Head Competition, Consumer Protection and Intellectual Property Rights Division, the ASEAN Secretariat, colleagues of the BMJV, members of the ASEAN Committee on Consumer Protection or ACCP, members of the ASEAN Coordinating Committee on Electronic Commerce or ACCEC, members of the ASEAN Consumer Association Network or ACAN, colleagues of the ASEAN Secretariat, distinguished speakers, distinguished panelists, and distinguished attendees of this conference. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and good morning. Allow me to begin my welcoming remarks by expressing my sincere appreciation to the German Federal Ministry of Justice and Consumer Protection, or BMJV, for organizing this conference with the ASEAN Committee on Consumer Protection, or ACCP. It is my pleasure to join you today to open the BMJV ACCP online conference on consumer protection in the digital age, on how can digital self-determination and access to justice be guaranteed. Before I begin, I wish all participants present today who are tuning in to our online stream from their respective homes or workplace are healthy, safe, and well amidst the continuation of the COVID-19 pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, the information age drastically evolved in recent years and has significantly changed and influenced millions of lives around the world for the better. We have seen advancement in smartphones, laptops, and tablet technology, as well as the World Wide Web and wireless communication. These are now becoming more and more accessible and affordable. These technologies have become an integral part of our life, where we depend on them to do our work, assist us in school, and more. We are at the point of our lives where we could not do without the technology. Nowadays, users are not confined to using the web for information, communication, and entertainment. They are also using them to purchase goods and services, thus transforming them into online consumers. We refer to this online shopping phenomenon as e-commerce. E-commerce provided consumers with seemingly unlimited selection and variety of products to purchase at competitive prices. Over recent years, its market size grew exponentially, with many e-commerce startups in ASEAN and around the world reportedly becoming tech giants, unicorns, or decacorns, as they call it, seemingly overnight. The current COVID-19 epidemic has shown the importance of e-commerce, especially during lockdowns, where consumers depend on online platforms to purchase essential goods while still observing COVID-19 health protocols at home. Of course, like many things in life, there are downsides to this sudden success. Users, and especially online consumers, are at risk of cybercrimes, as more and more are switching to internet e-commerce platforms to do their shopping and make investments. These risks include theft of sensitive information, such as passwords, banking accounts, social security numbers, personal identification, residential address, age and credit card numbers. Consumers are also vulnerable to a variety of scams, such as misleading or deceptive advertisement of fake information, and many more committed by fraudulent individuals or online businesses. These problems became pronounced during the pandemic as abuse and unfair trade practices by fraudulent online businesses increased substantially. Therefore, protecting and empowering consumer rights offline and online is crucial to build confidence and instill trust in these internet platforms for long-term sustainability. Consumer protection has long been recognized as an integral part of the ASEAN economic and social integration process. For almost 15 years, the ASEAN Committee on Consumer Protection, or the ACCP, has worked to ensure that consumer protection takes central stage in regional policy making agenda. Efforts by the ACCP are aimed at ensuring that consumer protection measures, including laws, regulations, and policies, are now in place in all 10 ASEAN member states. There is a focus on developing mechanisms for consumer redress and ensuring product recalls are in place, as well as improving and strengthening the capacities of consumer protection authorities. There is also an ardent desire to enhance consumer access to information. Some of the notable recent ACCP achievements related to today's conference include the development and dissemination of the Code of Good Online Business Practice in ASEAN and the simultaneous launch of 3 regional campaigns on consumer education on online shopping. These initiatives are in line with the strategic approaches adopted under the ASEAN Economic Community or AEC Blueprint 2015 to 2025 and the more detailed initiatives under the ASEAN Strategic Action Plan on Consumer Protection, also known as the ASAPCP 2020. A detailed presentation on the ASAPCP and its deliverables will be presented by our keynote speaker, Mr. Louis of the ASEAN Secretariat. Ladies and gentlemen, the ASEAN High-Level Principles, or the AHLP for Consumer Protection, published on July 2017 at the ASEAN Consumer website, intends to support AMS in their efforts to improve consumer protection in the legislative, institutional, and other dimensions. The AHLP provides a broad framework for AMS seeking to achieve the goals of the ASAPCP 2021 in the development of laws, regulations, and enforcement arrangements. Principle 8 of the AHLP states that all AMS are to conduct regular reviews of existing consumer protection laws and practices to determine amendments or additional subsidiary legislations needed to be implemented to provide effective protection to consumers online. The goal in improving and upholding consumer protection in ASEAN is the main reason the ACCP are cooperating with the BMJV. This cooperation started first with a workshop for consumer protection authorities on e-commerce that took place in June 2021. This 2-day conference will act as a forum where policymakers, academics, practitioners, and the public can exchange information, experiences, and dialogues on emerging issues in consumer policy and advocacy across Germany, Europe, and the ASEAN region. In this conference for day 1, we will hear our esteemed speakers talk and discuss about 1. Consumer policy in the digital age, its challenges and perspectives. 2. A detailed presentation on ASEAN's priorities in strengthening consumer protection in the digital age. 3. What are some consumer risks in the evolving digital landscape in ASEAN? 4. Promoting digital self-determination of consumers, which will be divided into 2 parts. The first, digital empowerment with a special focus on vulnerable consumers. And second, best practices on consumer enabling technologies. For day 2 of the conference, we will hear our esteemed speakers talk and discuss about 1. New technologies to facilitate consumer access to redress, and 2. A panel discussion on the role of civil society, business and policymakers or regulators in shaping digital consumer policy. Ladies and gentlemen, the digital economy in ASEAN is here to stay and will become a main driver in economic growth for the foreseeable future. Consumer protection agencies in ASEAN must therefore continue relentlessly to upgrade their digital policy-making skill set and strengthen cross-sectoral and cross-border cooperation to deal with emerging e-commerce issues and unforeseen challenges in the digital economy. Before I end, I would like to thank once again everyone, especially the BMJV and the ACCP for organizing this conference, the GIZ colleagues for their continued support, the ASEAN Secretariat, the consumer associations from the Europe and ASEAN, panelists and speakers, and last but not least, distinguished delegates and participants for your attendance. Thank you, stay safe, and back to you, Ms. Melinda Craig.
Excellency, Secretary General, thank you very much for your remarks, for that outlook, and also for your reminder that the pandemic has ushered in changes in the way that we work and shop that are undoubtedly here to stay. And I think our audience poll that we took a little bit earlier is a reminder of that. It's the middle of the business day, both here in Europe and in Asia, and in fact, well over half of the audience is working from home. So many thanks for that. Dear ladies and gentlemen, if you were present at the workshop in June that was just mentioned by the Secretary General, then you will remember that our host and co-organizer, Germany, as well as the European Union, has made consumer protection of online consumers, a key focus of its recent policy initiatives. We hear more now in a keynote on consumer policy in the digital age. It is a great pleasure to hand over to the State Secretary in Germany's Federal Ministry of Justice and Consumer Protection, His Excellency Christian Kastrop. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Melinda. Honorable Secretary General, Undersecretary, Assistant Director, dear speakers, dear colleagues from ASEAN, GIZ and BMJV, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to today's conference on consumer protection in the digital age, jointly organized by the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and the Federal Ministry of Justice and Consumer Protection, supported by the GIZ. As State Secretary for Consumer Protection and Digital Society, I'm quite honored to have the opportunity to speak to you about challenges and perspectives in consumer policy in the digital age and the very important issues you are addressing, particularly in today's sessions. We will focus on digital self-determination and access to justice in our countries, key issues for consumers in an economy shaped more and more by digital business models with high dynamics, for instance, e-commerce platforms and social networks. Let me say that this international conference is a further step in our hopefully rich and fruitful cooperation on the matter of digital consumer protection. We started off with a workshop on challenges, the need for action, and best practices for e-commerce in June of this extraordinary, still pandemic year. Digital technologies are shaping the modern life. They bring about benefits for consumers. Think of the new ways we found to communicate in the ongoing pandemia, holding virtual meetings and learning in the digital space. And I think most or nearly all of us have become acutely aware of the digital revolution taking place right around us. Children faced homeschooling, employees have been working mainly from home office, working remotely. And it took some time to get technology to everybody, even in Germany. So not only consumers, but also the economy as a whole can hugely benefit from digitalization. And modern technologies are able to boost productivity and growth. By this way, it can also help us to reduce poverty and increase living standards on a global level. So in addition, these technologies can also help us battle challenges like climate change. But beyond this, however, we must also draw our attention on the, so-called dark side of these technologies and potential disadvantages we should avoid. So many consumers face manipulative design features. For instance, dark patterns is a very popular word here, on online platforms. Design tricks force consumers in their daily decisions to disclose, for instance, personal data unnecessarily. They spend more money than needed, and they develop, in the worst case, addictive behavioral patterns, and ultimately lose their trust in the digital innovation, and this will harm us all. For example, through personalized advertisement and manipulative designs, children and teens are induced to conducing purchases while playing online games. Therefore, it's more important, really, to empower especially vulnerable consumers to navigate successfully in digital environments. And therefore, we must strengthen digital literacy. So, however, the dark side not just applies to consumers, but also to firms and markets. Platform regulation is a first pressing issue in these times. Big platforms especially have an enormous market power. So this is also bad for consumers, as these platforms can easily influence purchasing behavior in providing information via social media channels. On the other hand, these, say, natural monopolies with network effects can also have an impact they have already an impact on competition and market activity. If these platforms act like a gatekeeper for the markets and regulate the access, then in the end, large platforms alone may decide what consumers see or what information is made available for them. So, and this can not only harm consumers, but it is mean in the end it can be less innovation, less productivity, and less competition will mean less economic growth. So this is unacceptable, not only to the economic sphere, but also to the consumers. And therefore we discuss new regulatory measures here in the European countries. So let me just highlight two very important issues where my ministry is also very usually involved with. This is the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act. In the Digital Services Act, we advocate for greater responsibilities of e-commerce platforms and online marketplaces to protect consumers. We believe that they should take a more proactive role in identifying and preventing content, for instance, related to illegal or false offers, unapproved or unsafe products or dangerous goods as such. Also, plagiarism is an important issue here. With a new legal package in place, will take some time. We are just starting the European consultation, then of course the national consultations will follow. But if this is dealt with, then these platforms will be responsible for ensuring that no fake shops, clearly illegal or fraudulent offers appear on the platform. So, and this is then what we meant also with the label fairness by design. So, both the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act aim at reducing this market power. So, let me give you some figures. In 2002, consumers paid an average of 15% in surcharges. In 2016, it was almost 28%. So this can be explained in part by the fact that companies, for instance Amazon, have become gatekeepers for many participants. So they have the power to dominate or set the prices. And it's especially consumers with low income who suffer most from this. And this also is true on a global level, and this will lead not to inclusion, but increasing social inequality. Let me give you some views on artificial intelligence, where my house is co-responsible in the government for the negotiations in Europe. Artificial intelligence is certainly one of the most disruptive and most pressing issues at the time. It offers enormous opportunities, economically, but also for civil society and consumers. It will help meet great challenges, climate change, stabilizing democracy. Nevertheless, it also poses risks. This is again the risk of discrimination, a lack of transparency of many AI systems. So, specific dangers can arise also if you have mass surveillance in public spaces, and this can even impair privacy very much. And also, coming back to the platform issue, of course, where AI is used, we have again the risk of manipulation through artificial intelligence, also in political elections and on online platforms. Algorithms can display what information is there to people, and they can also create social media bubbles, or in the end lead you to the very famous echo rooms where you just listen to things which you like to hear. So this leads to a fragmentation of the public discourse, a threat to balanced and open information from both sides or three sides, and therefore it can endanger democratic processes in all over the world. So, and this is why the Commission's Artificial Intelligence Act is really featuring the fundamental rights of the European citizens and has concrete regulations for AI mechanisms. Under the current draft, nevertheless, still consumers could have more rights. So there is not really a close relationship between the developers, the users of AI, and those people where the AI is used on them. So this is still something we need to work on hard. And we need, in the end, an ecosystem which I would call a kind of a human-centric digital governance, which was also a last highlight when we did the Global Solutions Summit of the G20 here in Berlin. So we need a set of institutions with actors from civil society, firms and science to jointly design criteria for artificial intelligence. It must always serve people and the common and the public good. This gives also social society a kind of a say in all these processes. So there is indeed no trade-off, this is at least what we believe, between human-centric digital governance and innovation of great new high productive business models. But we need to start from the beginning also to think about trust, acceptance and legal certainty. So technical innovation and legal requirements for technology are not mutually exclusive. So let me now come to the second day. So in the second day we will focus on the ways in which consumers can access to justice by means of new digital tools. So further steps towards the digitalization of our justice systems have enormous potential to facilitate and improve access to justice for all our citizens. And digital tools can help to have a better structure of proceedings in law processes to automate and accelerate the handling of standardized and uniform tasks, increasing the effectiveness and also the efficiency of court proceedings. What is important to me is that the digital reorientation of court proceedings should focus on expanding access to justice in the service of citizens. This is the crucial term. So in line with this people-centered design approach, it may be necessary to retain traditional non-digital processes alongside the new digital formats. So I really cannot imagine that a final legal say is just done by an artificial intelligence. There need still to be a human control for that. So we will also discuss how new technologies can facilitate consumer access to justice, and this is with some new, also very interesting economic idea. This is the opportunities which are offered by so-called legal tech institutions. And in the closing panel we will discuss which role civil society, business and policymakers as regulators should have in shaping the digital consumer policy in this legal part. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an ambitious program ahead of us, so we are quite excited for the inputs and discussions to unfold. So let me finally take this opportunity to thank the Association of the Southeast Asian Nations again, along with my ministry and the GIZ and our excellent moderator for the excellent cooperation so far, also in organizing this conference. And I believe this is valuable to exchange inputs on that topic also across the world, across our different cultures. This is a fantastic piece of cooperation between Germany, Europe, and ASEAN. So I'm thankful for everyone being so open and eager to work jointly on making this conference happen. So I wish you all an excellent conference with great inputs and many valuable takeaways.
Thank you very much, State Secretary, for that wide-ranging look at both the promise and also the downside of the expanding online marketplace. And you've also presented some very compelling arguments about why it is so important that policy design put empowering consumers and citizens at the very heart of its efforts. Ladies and gentlemen, permit me just one word on the promise of the digital age before we turn to a keynote from the ASEAN Secretariat. The e-commerce sector is perhaps the largest growth sector in Southeast Asia at the moment. One study records an exponential surge in digital retail of 85% year on year since 2020 and predicts that almost 80% of consumers in Southeast Asia will go digital by the end of the year. Picking up now on the State Secretary's theme that there is no trade-off between human-centric digital governance and business innovation, we hear more now about ASEAN's initiatives to formulate guidelines for consumer protection and also to ensure dispute resolution in e-commerce. Dear ladies and gentlemen, please note that we do welcome your questions after this keynote. And now it's my pleasure to hand over to His Excellency, Mr. Louis Teck Keong. He's head of the Competition, Consumer Protection, and Intellectual Property Rights Division at the ASEAN Secretariat. Welcome. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Melinda. Dato Sri Haji Hasnul Zamzam bin Haji Ahmad, Secretary General, Ministry Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs, Malaysia. Mr. Christian Castro, State Secretary, Federal Ministry of Justice and Consumer Protection, Germany. Fellow speakers, panelists, moderator, representatives for the ACCP, ACCEC, and GIZ, distinguished delegates, and my fellow colleagues. I will be speaking to you on the ASEAN priorities in strengthening consumer protection in the digital age. Next slide, please. The outline of my presentation comes in 4 parts. I'll be speaking on the ASEAN digital strategy. We should deal on the ASEAN digital potential, the catalyst for e-commerce, and also what are the sectors involved. The second part of it will concern the ASEAN Economic Community Blueprint 2025, where I'll be dealing with the strategic action plan and also the committee that is involved in implementation, the ACCP, and also giving you a preview of the consumer protection laws in ASEAN. The third part of my speech concerns the ACCP deliverables for the digital economy and the work that we do to protect consumer, the businesses, and also government and other sectors. And the final part is on challenges for the ASEAN digital economy, where we'll be speaking a little bit on the challenges and the e-commerce guidelines that we are developing, and also some of the gatekeepers platform line issue that we'll be dealing with. Next slide, please. Just very quickly, we just had the 53rd ASEAN Economic Ministers meeting highlights, and it was held just 4 or 5 days ago on video conference under the Brunei Darussalam chairmanship, under the theme We Care, We Prepare, We Prosper, and under the Bandar Seri Begawan Roadmap, which relates to the ASEAN digital strategy. The ASEAN digital transformation agenda would accelerate the ASEAN's economic recovery and digital economy integration. The work plan on implementation of the ASEAN agreement for e-commerce would be ratified by the ASEAN member states, had been endorsed. And the highlights would also include the planned consolidation strategy on the 4th Industrial Revolution, and also the cross-sectoral coordination under the ASEAN Digital Integration Framework Action Plan 2019 to 2025. And at the ASEAN Economics meeting, we have also launched the ASEAN Digital Integration Index, which is basically a baseline digital integration related index to measure the level of digital trade services available. Next slide, please. And as mentioned by Ms. Crane just now, the ASEAN digital potential is very great. The ASEAN internet penetration of the population penetration is between 40 to 90%. And the real GDP growth has reached about 4.8% in 2019, which outpaced the global growth at the rate of 2.9%. And ASEAN is also expected to become the fourth largest economy in 2020, and is on track to do so. We do have 650 million people who are youthful, and with nearly 60% of them below 35 years of age. Next slide, please. The COVID-19, of course, has created a catalyst for e-commerce, but other than that also, we have 40 million new users to add to the 400 million active users in 2020. Cash, of course, as a payment method have also declined from 48% to 37% in 2020, and e-wallet usage have rose from 18 to 25%. Other than that, the level of trust in e-commerce and the internet connectivity, out of 1 of 3 of the total digital service users are new. 94% of these new users intend to stay, and 80% of these users find tech helpful and indispensable. More importantly also, the mature sectors such as the e-commerce, transport and food, travel and media are also consolidated into this area. Deal activity has also picked up for the new sectors such as the fintech, health tech, ed tech, and among others, the B2B, SaaS, which is software as a service startups. Next slide, please. As also mentioned by Ms. Crane earlier, yes, our Southeast Asia internet economy is growing very fast. 2015 was only 32 billion. 2019 has become 100 billion and is projected to go to 2025 to 300 billion. Next slide, please. The various sectors which are involved in the development of the digital strategy is not just e-commerce alone. We will be also building on the digital infrastructure and connectivity, dealing on issues and relating to cybersecurity, and also digital inclusion and to building digital skills so that there's no digital divide that may arise as a result of the new digital economy. Then there's the issues of data governance, the respect for privacy, and also access to data for businesses and consumers. And finally, trade facilitation and logistics. Next slide, please. So in a quick nutshell, our ASEAN's digital strategy, we have a vision beginning from the year 2000 to 2021, starting with the ASEAN framework, moving ahead to establish the agreement to establish and implement the ASEAN single window, which is basically a unification of national single windows to expedite cargo clearance for trade expeditiousness. And 2016, the ASEAN framework on personal data protection, ASEAN framework on digital data governance was developed in 2018. 2019, the ASEAN agreement on e-commerce, ASEAN digital framework action plan. In 2020, digital integration index, which have been developed. And finally, 2021, the ASEAN digital master plan 2025 work plan for e-commerce and the regional action plan for implementation of the UN group of government experts norms. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So in a quick nutshell, you see that at the very top, we intend to establish an open, secure, interoperable, competitive, and inclusive digital market. This will be, of course, supported by the 3 pillars of e-commerce being the new driver for digitalization on the basis of the work plan on e-commerce. And the middle column is to accelerate the digital transformation in all sectors based on the digital integration framework action plan, which we have developed. Together, they will foster, in the third column on the right side, the integration in the ASEAN ecosystem. This, of course, will be built upon the infrastructure that has been developed on digital connectivity and data, cybersecurity I mentioned earlier, and enabling laws and regulations, which are standards, would be in line with international best practices, and also the development of digital talent, enabling innovation, R&D, and ensuring investment in startups could thrive in this sector. Next slide, please. So in a nutshell, you see that we do have a very massive and long vision for ASEAN digital strategy. As far as the ASEAN Economic Community Blueprint is concerned, this contains the strategy to develop the regional integration of the economic community from 2021 2015 to 2025. And in it, of course, the roles of all the sectors have been set out. And with regard to the ASEAN consumer protection, there are a few strategic measures which are in line with our action plan. And this is to establish a common ASEAN consumer protection framework, promote a higher level of consumer empowerment and knowledge, build higher consumer confidence, and cross-border commercial transactions. Also to encourage consumer-related matters in ASEAN policies, and promote consumer protection measures in products and services. Next slide, please. And under the, next slide, please. Under the ASEAN Strategic Action Plan, next slide, please. There are, of course, 4 strategic goals, 11 outcomes, and 19 initiatives. Next slide, please. And we now spell out, just very quickly, next slide, please. The ASEAN Strategic Action Plan for Consumer Protection. You notice that the 4 strategic goals are on your left side, but on the right side are the outcomes to develop the high-level principles for consumer protection which have been done, recommendations for improving the effectiveness of consumers' protection regimes in ASEAN are identified and implemented, and legal framework for consumer protection in AMS strengthened. And then another level, high level of consumer empowerment and knowledge to develop the capacity of consumer protection agents in ASEAN are strengthened. Next slide, please. Then under the strategic goals, high consumer confidence, the outcomes are to develop the existing dispute resolution and redress mechanism, and also the new dispute resolution and redress mechanism are set up in ASEAN to resolve domestic and cross-border disputes. Also the outcomes of product safety enforcement in ASEAN is strengthened. In relation to the integrating consumer policies, we'll develop regional platforms and tools for in ASEAN to engage and provide information to consumers at large. Higher level of consumer empowerment is ensured. Impact assessment and social consumer protection issues are discussed at higher level to gain better traction. Next slide. So the ASEAN Committee on Consumer Protection, the ACCP, they are the body that's responsible for implementing those deliverables, established in 2007 and endorsed by the ASEAN Economic Ministers. The ASEAN Consumer Association Network was established in 2018. So the focus is to provide exchange of information, experience of consumer protection policies, encourage the development and implementation of effective consumer protection laws and policies, empower ASEAN consumers, and also hold regular stakeholders engagements. And as far as the Consumer ASEAN Association Network is concerned, to hold dialogues, workshop, public forums, and engage with them, and to strengthen the Consumer Association to encourage participation in standard setting. Next slide, please. You'll notice that the status of consumer protection laws in ASEAN, all 10 AMS have established consumer protection laws. Some of them are being revised in order to address the various emerging challenges in the digital economy. Next slide, please. The primary stakeholders for the ACCP activities, of course, are the ASEAN consumers, the ASEAN businesses, and also the ASEAN protection agencies and government institutions. Now I will deal with the third part of my address on the various deliverables which we have developed for the purposes of protecting the consumers. Next slide, please. On consumers, on the ASEAN consumers, we have the ASEAN Regional Information Campaign, as mentioned by the Secretary General in his welcoming remarks, where consumer education has been enhanced by educating on topics such as online shopping, consumer redress, misleading and deceptive advertisement in the marketplace. We have also developed a handbook on ASEAN consumer protection laws and regulations. This is, of course, to inform the public on ASEAN laws and regulation, on consumer protection, and also consumer protection agencies of ASEAN member states, their contact particulars and access and emails, the complaints mechanism available for redress and remedies, and also what are the information national consumer associations that might be operating there. Next slide, please. Other than that, we have also developed we are developing the ASEAN Online Interactive and Distance Learning and e-learning modules. This is, of course, a set of online lessons and planned for the public with interactive multimedia and downloadable content. Tools will be hosted on the ACCP website with the following 4 modules: understanding consumer protection, becoming consumer champion, building consumer movement, and also mediating disputes. Next year, we will also be organizing the ASEAN Consumer Protection Conference as part of advocacy to discuss consumer protection issues in ASEAN. It is intended to get better traction and visibility of this issue to the public. And on the module on developing the ASEAN Consumer Association guidelines, which is ongoing, these are guidelines which is to cover organizational topics relevant to running and also future consumer associations in ASEAN. Next slide, please. For the ASEAN business, and also for the purposes of ensuring enhanced consumer protection, the ASEAN Online Business Code of Conduct, as also mentioned by the Secretary General, contains 15 core commitments towards consumers that can only be applied and adopted by online business. The code, of course, complies with the ASEAN High-Level Principle on Consumer Protection number 8, which is consumers in e-commerce are protected. And the joint endeavor between the ACCP and the ACCEC, the Code of Conduct, hopes to encourage online businesses to have stronger commitment on data protection, higher standard of credibility and transparency, more efforts to address complex demands and compliance, and a promise to deliver to consumers. Next slide, please. For the government institutions, we have developed the ASEAN Capacity Building Roadmap for Consumer Protection. The roadmap, of course, is to strengthen consumer protection regime in ASEAN, supportive measures to meet the goals of the ASCP to develop a regional 5-year rollover capacity building plan with a regional as well as national component building block activities. We have also developed the ASEAN guidelines on cross-border B2C dispute resolution. This is, of course, to guide and facilitate the institution handling and infringement settlement of dispute between consumers and businesses across jurisdiction. And in relation to the ASEAN Rapid Alert System, information exchange which have been developed, the information for public of unsafe consumer products in the products uploaded by the AMS system intends to raise awareness for consumers. The next slide, please. Other than that, of course, the report on the needs and gaps in access to dispute resolution and address systems in ASEAN is an ongoing deliverables. And the purpose of it is to study the needs and gaps for the access of this in every of the AMS, with the long-term view of developing a ASEAN network of online dispute resolution and also alternative dispute resolution to ensure that cross-border disputes are resolved. Other than that, we are developing an improved ASEAN product alert system and a framework for the collection and assessment of data on product-related injuries at the national and ASEAN level. The 2 training modules to apply good consumer protection practices on marketing and advertising and data privacies are being developed at this point in time. And these are also targeted to provide government institutions with the knowledge and skills to create and implement policies that enables effective consumers law enforcement. Next slide, please. So for the government institutions, we are developing the ASEAN Toolkit on Sustainable Consumption, which is ongoing. This is basically to promote sustainable consumption to businesses, consumers, and other relevant stakeholders to enable and to capacity build government agencies to formulate policies for these purposes. The next deliverables on the guidelines on consumer impact assessment. This is the guideline and toolkit to provide a framework for systematically screening policies, law, and regulations according to the likely impact on consumers. These are, of course, important for the purposes of enabling and to know the impact of policies for future and better policy making. And the voluntary external peer reviews of national laws, regulations, and e-commerce are being we've just been completed. And in this regard, the Philippines report would be made available to the public and following its publication shortly. Other than that, next slide, please. We have developed the ASEAN Online Guidelines on Online Dispute Resolution, which is still ongoing and is a part and parcel. It complements the study on needs and gaps on the access to system and redress. The other deliverables which we have completed is the ASEAN Consumer Empowerment Index, which is an important index to ensure to find out the benchmark of national level consumers empowerment in each AMS. Currently, the ASEAN consumers are considered as moderately empowered at 63.7%. Other than that, there are 3 regional guidelines for the development of laws and regulations, of which e-commerce is what we are doing now. And one of the purposes of this conference is to use and apply the outcomes for the purpose of developing the ASEAN guidelines on e-commerce. Other than e-commerce would be the unfair contract terms and product safety and labeling. Next slide, please. We are also working with the ACCC, the Consumer Affairs Program, for the purposes of providing capacity building activities on a bilateral basis, and also to address consumer challenges on issues such as consumer product safety and also consumer scams. Next slide, please. Other ACCP activities include regular interaction with international organizations on best practices, outputs with UNCTAD and OECD, participation in UN and intergovernmental experts and law. So what are the challenges for the ASEAN digital economy? These, by and large, are still the same. Unfair online business practices, where advantage of consumers, there's a lot of taking advantage of consumers through unfair contracts on false product information. There's also the challenges of data protection, online frauds and scams. Then there's also the challenges, next slide please, on redress for national and cross-border disputes, consumer awareness and education, which have to be provided continuously, and also the issue of limited resources. If I may just move on to the last part of my presentation, the next slide, please. The e-commerce guidelines, which we are going to develop, would include the following areas: background and overview, where we will deal with the general level relevance of consumer protection e-commerce, providing orientation, devising appropriate measures, key concepts, general principles, information and disclosure. Next slide, please. Other than that, there'll be topics on data protection, privacy, mobile and online payments, liability and redress, digital literacy skills and co-regulation, and finally, regional cross-border cooperation. And finally, one important issue for us in ASEAN, of course, would be the issue of platform liability, to what extent in which we need to impose liability or obligation on platforms, and what's the role that consumers have to play in terms of looking after themselves as well, whether the principle of caveat emptor should apply. And of course, the participation of other stakeholders, like brand owners and also government agencies, so that a more holistic overview and strategy can be developed to address all the issues in the digital economy impacting the consumers. Finally, to wrap up very quickly, the growth of the digital economy, the last slide, please, is exponential, as mentioned by the previous speakers. It's a game changer, and consumer protection must continue to evolve, and cross-border transaction will be the default, requiring regional cooperation. Redress and access to alternative dispute resolution with enforceable remedies must be developed so that they would not only be paper judgment for consumers. Data privacy and security issues have to be ensured in order to develop trust, and consumer awareness and constant education have to be carried out constantly. And with that, I'd like to thank the BMJV, GIZ, and also all the stakeholders and those who are present here today for making this conference a success. I wish you all a fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Excellency, Mr. Lui, thank you very much for that very comprehensive and very interesting overview. And let me just say to our audience, dear ladies and gentlemen, this is now an opportunity for you to pose your questions, both to Mr. Lui and also to State Secretary Kastrup. Please use our question window for that. You'll see it right below the chat window on your screens on the right-hand side, and you can also send a short commentary via the chat if you like. And we do just have a couple of questions that have already come in, so I will pose those to our speakers. And the first question that has come in to us from a I presume student or perhaps professor or faculty at the University of Indonesia, is this: consumer activities in the digital age are besieged by growing problems related to the complexity, opacity, and uncertainty around the use of personal data, as well as misleading, unethical, and fraudulent commercial practices. What are the challenges that consumer rights protection is facing in the digital age? Dear State Secretary, perhaps you want to list, let's say, the top three, because that is a very big question.
And I think this is the real big question we all face. And I think what is mentioned here is really, I think, the entire core of what we need to tackle. And I think my first takeaway is something which was already mentioned by my predecessor in speaking. I think, and this is really the international cooperation. I think if we have complexity, opacity, uncertainty, we really try to strive for a kind of a global understanding. What do we mean with that? And this is not just a quick and fast shot. I think this will really also need that we discuss our societies, how they are working, how can we empower people, how can we give control, and this is one very important issue, that those who give the data, who deliver the data, and this is of course very useful that they give the data, they deliver them. I think people have to be safe that they are not used against them, either in breaching the privacy, or the other issue, make economic models of natural monopolies, which in the end will destroy competition and then also consumer benefits. So we really need to bring this on a global level in the end. Of course, we have all to do our homework, but then we should discuss it in the international fora with the help of the G20, with the help of the OECD. I think this is all. This is, I think, my message to tackle this flower pot which was presented here by the question.
Thank you very much. And I want to come back and dig a little bit deeper in a moment on the question of international cooperation. But first of all, to Mr. Lui, the same question. You also outlined a broad range of risks. Which are the main ones that really keep you up at night as in your capacity as head of division?
Thank you very much. I think one of the main challenges is really the mastery of technology. We are very concerned because for whatever legislative approaches and also the strategy that we implement, we would try not to be like, one step behind what the perpetrators are doing in terms of the deployment of their technology. Apparently, we should ensure that our technology is actually moving faster and ahead of the perpetrator and the organized crimes, because they do have access and deep pockets, and they're able to ensure that these technologies would be able to be used to manipulate and also to avoid and circumvent all the steps that we might take to try to stop them and enforce the laws that we have sort of passed. But other than that, also the consumers themselves must also play a very strong role, and I think this is when education is very important to start off from very, very young, because I understand that if there are really issues such as this, which is very challenging, and also then we really need to start them off at a very young age to understand that when you deal with the internet economy and all that, you have to ensure that your common sense is not being surrendered. And then if you sense there's red flags, you must be able to act on it and to know when not to trust the website that you're on. But more importantly also is because in terms of the consumers, in terms of numbers, there's so many of us, and I believe, and also we have so much more resources than those who want to abuse and manipulate this system. I believe in the longer term, we should be able to win this game and not to allow them to exploit us. Thank you.
Mr. Lui, can I just ask you one follow-up on the issue of raising public awareness and providing consumers with more information? That is a key part of your strategy, and you outlined the different aspects of that. Are you concerned, though, about information overload? Is there a point at which are there limits to empowering consumers by providing more information?
I fully appreciate your questions, Ms. Crane. In fact, what I have in mind is, really not about just, just pouring information and then overloading them, but really to help to address these information at the most basic level. Like, for example, developing an icon. When you look at a particular icon or a red flag, or maybe one or two words,
Mr. Louis, I'm just going to interrupt you there because we are having some breakup. Maybe we're going to give your online connection a chance to restore itself, and I will go briefly to the State Secretary. Mr. Louis, I don't know if you can hear me, but
education.
There we go. Better. Okay, I think we're going to work on improving your connection. Let me just pose the same question to State Secretary Kastrup. State Secretary, clearly there are risks associated with information overload. What would you say are the most crucial pieces of information we need to get to consumers, and how can we avoid overloading them with information and thereby undermining the goal of raising awareness?
Yeah, I think the most important information the consumer may need is what is happening with his behavior in the digital rooms. So, and this is about data. This is about leaving a trace in the digital rooms, and that this is then reused. And I think this is all the critical things. So this will empower artificial intelligence, but this will also empower via artificial intelligence and learning machines. Also kind of endangering your privacy. It will put you into dark patterns. You can be manipulated. You see, there is no public curation within the internet. You have just to rely on the safety itself. There is a general regulation. But I think the main issue would be what is happening with the informations and the traces you leave in the internet. You can do this, of course, a bit with empowerment and literacy, but we may also need a kind of a societal structure for that. So what institutions in the digital room can help the individual consumers, maybe also for a kind of a collective redress. And this, of course, can be the state, the public, but I think most important is probably that we also have an institutional design in the digital rooms, on the platforms, within the platforms, where you have a kind of a collective redress possibility, for instance, via data trustees or data intermediaries, who may also be able to check algorithms which are used on you. So I think we need this public oversight, we need regulation, empowerment, digital literacy, but we may also need a new, say, societal institutional design in the digital rooms, where people can go at it also quickly. You see, if it's about regulation and the law, this will take time. It's necessary to have a regulation, to have a law, but much more important is that consumers, civil society can immediately react to fraudulent issues, to unsafe products, or to dark patterns.
Thank you very much. Let me try and see whether Mr. Louis' connection is better now. Mr. Louis, unfortunately, I stopped you in midstream there. If your connection's better, you're welcome to pick up where you left off in regard to the potential of information overload for consumers. And I would add another question as well, because the State Secretary just talked about the importance of ensuring that business adhere also to codes of conduct. You yourself mentioned that, but I would have a similar question on that point, which is how far voluntary codes of conduct really take us. Of course, there are a lot of economic incentives for business to use some of the manipulative devices we're talking about. So perhaps join up your answer on voluntary codes of conduct for business with information and public awareness for consumers.
Yeah, thank you very much. As far as voluntary compliance is concerned, of course, there would definitely be a place in which we can start by developing awareness first on the part of the consumers, and also the need on the part of the businesses to ensure that the practices comply with certain international standards. It will have to be a graduated and step-by-step approach. You can't just go straight in and start to impose laws and making it mandatory. And it also takes a long time as well. There's a need to develop, of course, some kind of a culture of awareness of ethical behavior, not only on the part of the businesses, but also whoever that access the internet for the purposes of the various business transactions that they go into. And insofar as building awareness is concerned, of course, a very important aspect of it is our own common sense. Whilst it is important to have a lot of activities and education and awareness that's being carried out in the environment, we must also rely and actually believe in our own intuition, our own judgment, and also our also to know that we are able to tell when we are going to be taken in for a ride. So it is important to highlight those education, but it's also important to build their confidence within their personal assessment of the digital environment around them. And finally, I suppose I just want to add that we are not alone as far as the consumers are concerned. There's a need for peer references. There's a need for us to check with our friends, check with our communities and neighbors. If we come across, like for example, a deal which is like too good to be true, chances are it is going to be too good to be true and all that. And so we should refrain from parting with our monies and all that. And a lot of these are really just common sense to begin with. And sometimes it's very unfortunate to hear of a lot of the vulnerable and the marginal, falling prey to all this. But I believe the information and campaign must continue to be done, not only just in the main languages, but also in the local languages as well, in the local languages, because like in ASEAN, we've got like many different types of languages and communities, and this takes time to be translated. And I believe the work has to be continued on a regular basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let me now, in our remaining time, pick up just a little bit on that theme of international cooperation and how we can share best practices. At the end of Mr. Louis' remarks, dear State Secretary, he talked about looking to see what might be relevant for ASEAN, for Southeast Asia, within the new scope of the EU approach in the Digital Service Act and the Digital Markets Act. Perhaps you could just delve a bit deeper for us, if you would, as to where you see the sort of centerpiece of those two approaches and what you think might be transferable to a different set of cultural circumstances. What's the heart of the matter that perhaps could transcend regional differences?
Yeah, that's a tricky question, and it's not that easy to answer, to be very honest. But nevertheless, I think if we start with the Digital Services Act, I think there are two main issues at stake. One is what we discuss here mainly. This is the so-called transaction side. It's what was happening on trading platforms. I think there, of course, it's really important that the big global players really take on their own responsibility here. So it's about the liability, and the great platforms cannot just say we just bring demand and supply together. We are kind of a neutral intermediary, as these platforms also start to produce own products, and I think they have to take some, consumer protection on themselves, and they cannot just say we are free of any liability what is happening on our platform. And I think this is one issue for sure, I think, which will be true also for the Asian countries as well. So that's one part, and I think and this is then all about micro tracking on advertising, on dark patterns, which was already mentioned here in the room. The other side I would like to highlight is the so-called interaction side, and this is a bit about hate speech, bullying in the net. that people were forced in the end, for instance, to drop out and say, I do leave the digital discourse, and this is so-called silencing. So, and this is why we are very eager to have a tight control also in these societal dangerous developments, that people are bullied within the net, they are hate messages, even threats posed on them. And I think this is another issue we really need to control, and this has something to do what we also discuss on the European level, what is to be notice and take down. Yeah? Remember what happened in the United States, for instance, with some comments of the former president there. So I think this is really an issue which has probably a bit more intercultural differentiation. I'm very well aware of that. So there is no one-size-fits-all solution, but I think we all want to have stable societies where you can live in the digital rooms without being endangered or forced out. I think this would then also hamper the societal discourse. And last point, maybe on a very global level, and I think this will also be discussed by Monika Schnitzer later here, is about there is a certain relation also of a functioning Digital Services Act for global competition. So there is also an issue there that a well-done consumer protection can also help to control, say, market positions which have a monopolic structure and which will then in the end hamper consumer benefits and consumer rents.
Thank you very much. Let me go to Mr. Lui and ask for your response to that. And what we're essentially hearing is that we can't simply assume that roles in the digital space are analog to what we know in the real world, but we're hearing from the State Secretary, we need to really take a look at the functional role that different actors play and how they interrelate in the digital space, particularly in regard to digital marketplaces, online marketplaces. Does that resonate with you, and what kind of challenges does that pose for policymakers in Southeast Asia?
Well, of course, over in Southeast Asia, unlike the European Union, we don't have a union, but we are an association of 10 different countries, 10 different set of laws. So, of course, what we are doing now is to develop those domestic legislation so that approximate some kind of a convergence, maybe with a longer view of having a more unified kind of laws. The strategy is concerned to contain and to address the scourge in the digital economy. So it's not going to be a one particular stakeholder. It's going to be a holistic partnership involving both the platform owners, the brand owners, the consumers themselves, the government agencies, and also all the various intersectoral government agencies for the purposes of ensuring that we are working hand in hand and with a broad vision to try to address this scourge, because the parties and the opposite people that we are working at are the organized crimes, and they are very well organized. So we have to be more organized than them, because we do have a lot of resources, and then we do have all the various strategies and also the regional platform for this to happen. So I believe in the longer term, this platform and also the challenges of the digital economy can be addressed, provided that we work together and not think only about our own self-interest and also our interest from the point of view of business or whatever. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lui Tek Keong, Head of Division at the ASEAN Secretariat, for sharing your thoughts with us. And I would like to also say to the audience that I'm sorry that sometimes we had some dropout on that line. Nonetheless, you have shared with us very, very interesting thoughts about where ASEAN is going in this very critical area. And I'd also like to thank State Secretary Kastrup for sharing best practices and for giving us an overview on what is being done here in Germany and Europe to enhance consumer protection, particularly in connection with online marketplaces. So, dear ladies and gentlemen, we now have an opportunity to take a break. I so much wish that we were all together and we could enjoy some fellowship while we perhaps get a bit of refreshment, but we will take this break virtually and reconvene here in exactly 15 minutes to dive deeper on the issue of how we empower consumers, how we provide them with the information that they need to make truly informed decisions in online marketplaces. So come back in 15 minutes, please, for that very interesting session. See you shortly. And welcome back, everyone. We've just heard opening remarks and keynotes that reminded us how important international exchange is for addressing the consumer protection challenges and risks that our speakers have identified. For the remainder of today's session, we now want to focus on what we can learn from each other very concretely. We want to talk about programs and best practices that really facilitate digital empowerment and self-determination on the part of consumers. And we begin with an expert presentation from Indonesia that drills deeper on some of the real-world risks that online consumers are facing. Joining us virtually from Jakarta is an academic with extensive knowledge of competition and data protection law in both Europe and Asia. A very warm welcome to policy analyst and associate professor at the Atma Jaya Catholic University of Indonesia, Ms. Juliana Wayungingtias Siswatono. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ms. Melinda Crane, for the introduction. Good morning to you. Some of you maybe a good afternoon, and in any case, a good day to you all. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity given to me to share some thoughts, insights in this very precious event today. And special thanks go to the BMGV, the ACCP, the GIZ, the German Corporation, and our dear moderator, and all the participants and audience. And before I start, I'd like to mention several points. First is that the discussion that I will bring here is still at an early stage and thus merits further research and policy work down the road. And second, the examples and references that are primarily taken from the Indonesian context, with some general questions for whole of ASEAN in moving forward. And lastly, there are likely common concerns and challenges in other ASEAN countries, but also some differences or nuances because of the heterogeneity of political and economic systems. So let's start with the discussion. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the issue that I will discuss here is first of all regarding the abusive data practices, concrete examples, again, mostly in Indonesia. And then the second is about different stages in an e-commerce transactions process where consumers would be or might be at risk. And then I will discuss a little bit about dark patterns in e-commerce. And then I will continue with the complexity of enforcing consumer protection in e-commerce. Then the key consideration for formulating appropriate policies. And lastly, I will talk about an outlook on issues to resolve. Next slide, please. So about the abusive data practices in e-commerce, if we talk about some examples in particular in Indonesia, we can check the data handling by private entities. This can be seen, for For instance, in cases of data leak that has been happening quite well frequently, just to mention two of those are the Tokopedia case in 2020, so last year, and the BRI Life Insurance case in this year, so 2021. There's also a problem with the use of personal data as debt guarantee and what's so called here in Indonesia, pinjol, from pinjaman online, meaning loan, getting loan online. If you want to get some loan online, it's much easier to get it from this online platform than from banks, because you don't need mortgage, you don't need any guarantor, you don't need all those paperwork, and with no guarantee that your application will be approved. So you can just go to this online platform that provides for this loan. And what is needed for you to get a loan is your contact list on your mobile phone. And how this would work. So when you get this loan and your debt is default, you need to pay, but you somehow have problem to pay, then you would be kind of forced to pay your debt, because otherwise your debt would be disclosed to your contact list. So this is, of course, embarrassing for you, kind of public shaming in a way. And there was also a problem with somebody losing her job, because not only this person was ashamed, but also the institution where she worked for was ashamed of this issue, this case of this employee, and she got fired. And then there are also many issues about consent when we talk about informed and voluntarily consent. So the problem with the informed consent, or well, in general about consent, is that we usually perceive, mostly in Indonesia, yeah, we usually perceive that when you click OK, when you click agree, when you sign the contract, and that's it. It's your consent, so you cannot do anything. Yeah, in a way, yeah, this is a proof for your consent, but whether this is given voluntarily, whether you're well informed about the content of what you are or will be or have been agreed upon, this is another issue. So you don't know in advance what, for instance, what will be given to you, what your rights are. You don't really know why you are asked to give certain data, personal data, and you don't know what it is for. You don't know how would it be processed, to whom it will be then shared at all, and normally, yes. So this is problematic. And then you don't know how to get out of this. And voluntarily, because you're not really well informed about what you are in. Of course, then there's a problem also with the concept of voluntary. So this is also becomes something that's very problematic in most cases. Because sometimes or often that consumers just agree on what they have to agree just to get the services, and this is of course not good for the consumers. And as I said, in the end, when they want to get out, they don't know how to do it. And then the treatment of personal data, especially for underage users, because in Indonesia, children also can use a mobile phone, and this can be used for various purposes, including for commercial transaction. there is this limitation. For instance, if you want to buy alcohol, you have to be above 17, so you cannot be underage, and you are asked to provide your ID to prove that you are not underage. But only that. And as we know, that commercial transaction is very broad, much broader than just buying a couple of beer. And then intrinsic marketing, we have problems. For instance, it's quite common for you here to get calls from unknown persons, and this person just give you offers about services or loans or whatever. And in some cases, this person could also be very aggressive and could, in extreme way, implied. And also, you can get messages, text messages. For instance, when you are in a train and you're passing a certain area, and suddenly you got messages saying that if you buy a cup of coffee, then you will get another cup for free. Yeah, this is kind of nice, but actually not everybody wants this text landed in their mobile phone. So it's quite annoying. And then personalized pricing. This is or for instance, in the online travel agency platform, when you are, for example, booking a hotel room, and at the same time your colleagues are also trying to do the same, but it could happen that you get different prices. And also in different case, for instance, if you are a frequent user, then it could be you get a discount, but it could also be that your price is higher than other people because somehow you are known for becoming a loyal customer, and well, she will be back anyway. It doesn't matter how the prices are. But this is, as I said before, in the beginning, it is an early stage of study, and we are still investigating this. And also we have issues about fake reviews and rating inflation. This is when consumers, they give reviews, but in moments that they are vulnerable in a way that somehow they just give nice review, doesn't matter what happens with the services or products. And then some types of dark patterns, I will get back to that later. Next, please. Thank you. And there are also some points that we need to look more into in business practices. For example, the trends to build digital ecosystem between companies with large user database. This can be seen in the case of merger between Gojek and Tokopedia this year. And at the same time, with headquarters in Singapore, the merger between Grab and Shopee. Just for your information, if you're not familiar with these companies, both Gojek and Grab are companies operating in online transportation network. And Tokopedia, both Tokopedia and Shopee, they are e-commerce platform. And then data protection in cases of company mergers. For instance, in the case of the acquisition of Uber Asia by Grab in 2019, there was a problem that was maybe not seen as a problem, or well, you're not, but you just didn't do anything or couldn't in this case. So in this acquisition, when Grab acquired Uber Asia, at least the experience in Indonesia, when you have your Uber account in your mobile phone, this account and your credit, whatever, it doesn't matter how much money you left in your account, in your Uber account, then would be transferred automatically to Grab account. If you want to withdraw your money somehow, or do something else, or you just want to quit, you can't. It's transferred, and whatever you want to deal or how with, then you need to deal with later on with Grab. And then we have also we have been starting to study about the behavior of algorithms, or the company behind it, or the programmers, if we would. The question is whether algorithms are trustworthy, or instead they could be a deceitful digital butler. This is also still in the early stage of study. Next, please. Now the different transaction stages where consumer would or could be at risk. I categorize these different transaction into several stages. Could you please to click the next until the last part of the box? Thank you very much. So I categorize this from the early stage, starting from the advertisement, and then the formulation of the agreement or consent, and the performance, and afterwards how to exit, as I explained before, and then the post-performance. This is when you want to give review. I mentioned also before about fake reviews and rating inflation. And then the exercise, how the stage where you need to exercise your right when there is a dispute, or if there is a problem. So there are different types of risks here. Partly I have mentioned before, so I would just go to the last part about the how to exercise the rights. There are also a problem about where to go. Of course, we do have the Agency for Consumer Protection, but in many cases, consumers don't really know where to go and how, and what to get afterwards, and also what kind of remedies you would get when the problem is with the data breach or data leak. Because once your personal data is disclosed to unwanted parties, actually you cannot remove the information from other people's mind. So this is very problematic. Next slide, please. Yeah, in this part, I'd like to discuss briefly about dark patterns in e-commerce. This is mainly about a tricks strategy to deceive users, to covertly manipulate or coerce them into choices that they are not in their best interest. This is also an early stage of study, but we try to identify certain types that might take place in Indonesia, such as bait and switch, forced continuity or a subscription, a roach motel, and also what I haven't written here, the disguised ads. And we have problems in policy and enforcement responses. First of all, how to define certain practices that constitute dark pattern, and how to define harm to consumers, how to define this pattern as dark, and how to draw appropriate policy and enforcement for this. Next slide, please. And this is the complexity of enforcing consumer protection in e-commerce. We have main problems with the policy, the regulation, the agencies, qualification, evidence, liability, enforcement, and remedies. And we need also to identify elements to address that are, could you please click once again? There are at least 4 elements here. Is the awareness, not only on the part of consumers, but also on the part of the digital platform, the web designers, and so on. And then compliance to the existing regulation. But again, there is a need to update the regulation. And if we talk about ethical guidance, then we also have homework on that part. And then a code of conduct, as mentioned also earlier before the break. We are considering about this, but there is also a need to supervise this code of conduct. And then the enforcement and behavior changes. Next, please. I come now to the 5th part about a key consideration for appropriate policies. My apologies for the typos here. Could you please click just to the end? So we need actually, in essence, harmonization in various areas to balance out different interests. As mentioned already before about digital literacy on one hand, the technological development and the power and coordination, because we are dealing with the need for one-stop shop and who would it be, and the sectoral authorities and the political will, because we need competence on one hand, and the other we need also money, and the harmonization of regulation within ASEAN member states and among ASEAN member states. Last slide, please. Could you please? Thank you. About the outlook to issues to resolve is first, how does the existing consumer protection law tackle abusive practices and such as dark pattern in ASEAN member state, and would ASEAN guideline on the matter be helpful? Is there a model to consider a mechanism to better empower consumers? And how to protect underage users? If you use AI to identify underage user, whether would it good or not? And who should be the monitoring bodies, and how to establish an effective complaint channel so that to avoid double abuses for consumers. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much. Back to you, Ms. Melinda.
Thank you very much also for that wide-ranging look, accomplished absolutely punctually, right on time there. I'm very, very grateful for those messages and also that very clear outlook on where things go from here and what steps are so important. We're going to take that right with us now into our discussion, and with utmost gratitude to you. And we want to use the next 40 minutes now, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear speakers, to share best practices on true crucial aspects of achieving the aim of enhancing consumers' digital self-determination. In part 1, we're going to focus on how we can sensitize online consumers, how we can especially try to better inform vulnerable users, whether they're the underage users mentioned just now in that excellent presentation, or the elderly, or people who perhaps have less experience in the online world, how we can sensitize them to the risks that we've just been hearing about. And in part 2, we're going to begin exploring technologies that can empower consumers by making commercial websites more transparent to them, and thereby addressing some of the opacity that we just heard about in the presentation. So it is now my pleasure to introduce the panelists for part 1. Ms. Monika Schnitzer is Professor of Economics and Chair for Comparative Economics at the Ludwig-Maximilian University in Munich, and she also serves as a member of the German Council of Economic Experts and of the European Commission's Economic Advisory Group on Competition Policy. We're so glad that you can be with us, Monika Schnitzer. Also with us is Klaus Müller. He is Executive Director of the Federation of German Consumer Organizations, in German, the Verbraucherzentrale Bundesverband e.V., and since May 2014. And he's also president of the European Consumer Organization, BEUC. Great to see you again, Klaus Müller. And finally, it's a pleasure to welcome Dr. Wimonrat Wim Teriyapirom, Director of International Cooperation at Thailand's Office of the Consumer Protection Board, who also serves as investigator professional level and senior officer at the Unsafe Product Verification and Alert Center. So a very high-ranking panel here to take us through this crucial issue. And just a reminder, dear speakers, our window of time is pretty compact, so I would be very grateful if you would give us TED-style presentations of 7 minutes or less. And I will begin with you, Professor Schnitzer. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Let's start with the first slide. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak about how and why we have to update our consumer protection rules for online markets. So next slide, please. How we think about consumer protection is shaken up by two important developments. First of all, by the increasing use of online markets and by the insights from behavioral economics, which help us identify and also find solutions for the problems that we find in these markets. And in the following, I will discuss 5 features of these markets that make them different and that need to be addressed by an updated consumer protection. Next slide, please. So why are online markets different? Let's start with the obvious difference, which is you have no direct physical contact with the seller. And that in itself already means that you need some basic rules. You need, of course, to provide the contact details on the website, but you also need to present the relevant information clearly and prominently. And you need to have a right of return, which is a no-fault right of return, because you cannot inspect the product yourself by physically seeing it, only once you receive it. And you need a clear complaint process and online dispute resolution. Now, the second feature of online markets is, of course, that in many cases, online services are provided for free. So it seems, well, actually, you don't pay for them, but you pay in a way with your attention and data. And that also means that when we update consumer protection law, we need also to cover these free services, because in a way, that's also commercial interaction, because you pay what you pay with your data. Next slide, please. A second feature of these online markets is that we have new forms of quality assurance that play an important role, like peer reviews, ratings, social influencers, the rankings of sites. And it should be clear that these user ratings and reviews should be presented in a fairly and non-selective way. The conditional incentivization of ratings and reviews should be prohibited, and in particular, procuring or selling fake reviews and ratings should be banned. And if social influencers receive payments for what they promote, then that should be made transparent, of course. And moreover, you need clear criteria that are prominently stated for rankings and inclusions in so-called buy boxes. Next slide, please. That would be an example why fake reviews actually do matter. That's an example from Amazon, which gives you a gift card, in the example that's from the UK, of £15 if you give a 5-star review. If you give a lower review, well, you won't receive a gift card. Now, how much do you trust this kind of ratings? Next slide, please. Also, the role of default rankings is really important, because consumers often stay with these default rankings, even if they can sort search results in a different way. This is an example from Booking.com, where the default rating or the default ranking is actually influenced by payments made by the people, by the businesses who sell their products on this website, so the hotels in this particular case. And that, of course, means that consumers are influenced by these paid rankings. Next slide, please. Third reason why online markets are different is often enough you find a lack of a clear delineation between advertising or sponsored placements or rankings and organic and neutral content, which really derive from the search algorithm. And it should be clear that these sponsored results should be clearly marked. So if you look at the of the right-hand side, I wonder if you can figure out which of these are online organic contents and which are advertising. Next slide, please. Fourth feature is the prominent role of online choice architecture, with this meaning that how you design a website. Here we need to ensure that it's consumer-centric, not designed in the interest of suppliers. For example, you should forbid opt-out selling, trip pricing or unavoidable charges, misleading referencing pricing, and messages that create a false sense of urgency or scarcity. Things that you have all experienced when you, for instance, go to booking.com and want to find a hotel room. Next slide, please. This is an example of such a trip pricing from a charge against Airbnb, which gave on its first page a price for this particular room of $237 pounds. And only after several more pages, when you finally wanted to conclude the rent, you realize that you had to pay actually a couple of more charges that were mandatory. You couldn't really opt out, so that altogether you had to pay 348 pounds. So they were charged for that, and they now changed the rules. But that means this is something that misleads consumers because they're lured in or attracted by this very low price, and in the end they have to pay much more. Next slide, please. Another different feature of this, or important feature of this online markets, is this growth of sludge practices. Sludge means the creation of a friction that averts people away from doing what's in their best interest. And this is particularly obvious, for instance, in this kind of auto-renewing or subscription type contracts, where we really need to facilitate the cancellation or the switching, which means that the price and the minimum contract period or the minimum purchase obligations, that should be stated clearly and prominently upfront. And you have to have a simple mechanism to cancel this kind of subscriptions. More generally, it should be as easy to cancel a contract as it is to sign up. And at the very least, it should be possible to cancel a contract via the same medium that you actually entered the contract. Next slide, please. And I skip that. Next slide, please. I skip the example. So let me wrap up and conclude by stressing that consumer protection fosters competitive markets, which is particularly important given that we have this high concentration in these online markets. These increased search and switching will drive up competition and reduce market power. And if consumer protection gives consumers greater confidence in this protection, that will foster trying new products, and that reduces incumbency advantages. Also, a neutral consumer architecture, consumer choice architecture, should reduce the potential for firms with existing market power to leverage their position into new markets. And it protects firms following the rules against unfair competition from irresponsible firms. And it prevents competition that drives down standards, so a race to the bottom. So let me conclude by saying consumer protection and competition are complements, and we should foster both of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monika Schnitzer, for that very, very interesting presentation, including many terms like sludge and drip, with which I was not until now acquainted. And thank you for giving us those inputs. Now we will go straight away to Klaus Müller. And dear ladies and gentlemen, if you think back to the keynote that we heard earlier from the ASEAN Secretariat's division head, he talked about the importance for consumers to realize they're not acting alone. They can look to other consumers for support, for information, for solidarity, as it were. We're going to hear now from Klaus Müller about what civil society and consumer organizations in fact can do to support consumer empowerment. Please, the floor is yours.
Well, dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the invitation. The past few months have turned our lives upside down in many ways. We worry about our jobs and the health of our loved ones. We wonder how to manage our daily lives between work and family. We have also had to fundamentally change our private and professional communication because of distinct rules. And instead of face-to-face contact, hardly a day goes by now that we don't get together in conference calls, make video calls, or use many other electronic means of communication that digitalization has brought us. A large part of our everyday life now takes place in this digital world. And it's hard to imagine how we would master this crisis without these possibilities. But this crisis also clearly shows us how our dependence on these tools work. In many cases, these changes in communication channels has been unplanned and chaotic. So if it was already difficult in the past to get an overview and the practices and terms and conditions of various providers, now one is happy to find a service at all that works for all work colleagues, friends, or family members. One service? Well, I at least can hardly keep track of how many new communication apps I've installed and how many providers I've dialed into conferences calls with. The nature of communication by electronic means has also changed. It is becoming more and more personal, and many things that seemed difficult or abstruse in the past are now possible. Suddenly, we use video consultation with our doctors or take part in church services via Zoom or other services. Well, against this background, we have to be sure that service providers respect the confidentiality of communication. So we are living in times of radical changes, and this also possesses great challenges for digital consumer protection. One big problem is certainly the complexity of many of today's technologies and value chains. Well, hardly any consumers know, for example, how tracking technologies work on the internet and to how many companies the data is transferred. Unfortunately, the main business on the internet is currently focusing on marketing of user data for advertisement purposes and to the determinant of the protection of privacy and confidentiality of communication. So we can inform, we can teach, we can counsel and be watchdogs for consumers. But however, to look for the solution in consumer empowerment alone would be short-sighted. Technical systems are becoming more and more complex, and the data processing involved is becoming more and more difficult to keep track on. Consumers who want to use the new products and services, but at the same time want to retain control over their data, they face a problem. They would have to become experts in technical procedures of the various services or the tracking technologies of the internet advertisement industry. And they have to keep up to date with new technological developments and functions nearly every day. So empowerment is important, but will that reach for all the things needed? Some people may enjoy this, others do not have the skills, the time, or resources to deal with those issues intensively. They want to use the new technologies that offer many possibilities and participate with them in today's society. Of course, it's a consumer's responsibility how important the protection of their data is to them. And they, of course, should have the freedom to determine what happens with their data. Greater transparency and better consumer education in schools, by teachers, by civil societies, are important foundations for this. But even then, consumers often do not have it in their hands at all, as many technical systems are a black box. Therefore, consumers must have a well-founded trust that their data will be handled responsibly and accordingly to their wishes. This requires clear legal regulations, which the Federation of German Consumer Organization, VCBW, advocates for. So this is the real and new dimension of empowerment. For example, in the upcoming e-privacy regulation, the principles of data protection by design and by default should be, for the first time, made binding for manufacturers of communication software to really empower consumers. A Eurobarometer surveyed by the EU Commission clearly shows that consumers want data protection-friendly default settings for their communication software. 90%, for example, of German internet users were in favor of such default settings in their web browsers. The survey also shows that especially older people, people with lower education, and people who use the internet rarely are less likely to change the privacy settings of their software. Privacy-friendly default settings thus primarily protect these particular vulnerable consumer groups. Another promising approach should be and could be so-called data intermediaries, as currently discussed in the European Data Governance Act. Such data intermediaries would give consumers better options to control their data and thus strengthen trust in digitalization and the data processing industry. But even if such data intermediaries are supposed to promote the digital self-determination of individuals, they can pose dangers. For example, the German Data Ethics Commission sees the risk that consumers could be led down a path to unconscious or careless third-party control. To counter these risks, it's right to give data intermediaries a legal framework. In the debate of the Data Governance Act, VZBV advocates that data intermediaries must act independently, neutrally, and without an economic self-interest in the exploitation of the managed data, and that conflicts of interests need to be excluded. I think it's essentially that we as a society continuously shape the handling of data together now, before advancing technology and a market takeaway of our decision-making options. I firmly believe that together we can manage the use of opportunities of modern technologies, but at the same time keep the risks as low as possible. So civil society is engaged in information, teaching, counseling, and watchdog activities. We sue companies, but what's really empowerment is the demand for a good regulation. This is true empowerment today. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Klaus Müller from the German consumer advocacy organization VZBV. And we will take your messages, including your messages about vulnerable users with us now, to our next panelist. We're going to cross to Thailand and hear what the government there is doing to enhance the protection and digital literacy, particularly of vulnerable online users. We go to Dr. Wimonrat Teriyapirom. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much to the moderator. Today, I'd like to share a presentation about the digital literacy on vulnerable consumers in Thailand. Next slide, please. According to the research studies, Thai people are increasingly trying to enter digital technology. There are 47 million users of LINE program, which we use for chit-chat. And there are reports of 119.2 million mobile subscribers, while we have only 67 million people in Thailand. And there are 61 million Facebook users. It shows that LINE program and Facebook are very popular in Thailand, while we have record of e-payment at 800,000. 512 billion baht in 2020, with the e-commerce value at 4,027 billion baht. Next slide, please. For this slide, I'd like to share the statistics of complaints concerning online purchasing from two major organizations. First is my office of the Consumer Protection Board, or we call OCPB, who has the power according to the Consumer Protection Act to receive complaints to resolve the problem between two parties, which is business person and consumers. In 2019, we received complaint on e-commerce or online purchasing around 31% of all complaints. It's around 6,200 cases about e-commerce. In 2020, the complaint on online purchasing raised to be 67%, which is around 8,500 cases. For this half year, we received around 20%, which is around 2,600 cases from January until now. The another organization, which on your right-hand side, we call them the Electronic Transaction Development Agency, or ETDA, who has responsibility about the digital technical development. The ETDA has a call center number 1212 who received a complaint on illegal websites, 24,209 cases, and online purchasing, 20,300 cases. These statistics show that while the government has tried to access the digital economy, has tried to develop more channel for our people to access the digital economy, but there are still many consumers, a lot of consumers who are facing problem with this digital consumption. The cause of complaint are from cyber scam and a lack of caution in vulnerable consumers. This is a matter that we urgently need to educate our consumers. Next slide, please. From this survey data, it was found that more than 60% of the Thai people interested in surfing the digital world. In this case, our government has been involved both in terms of skill development, build up knowledge, including digital literacy, and help our people when the damage happens. First, I'd like to start at ETDA, who has tried to push the community's products and services into integrate e-commerce in 17 communities in 4 regions throughout Thailand. They set up a lesson on community development with the e-commerce. They hope that all 17 communities will be like a model community of e-commerce development that will be inspired the other communities. However, our local farmers and traders still lack the skill in online selling, where ETDA has served as a mentor. Our farmers. Some farmers cannot use like the smartphone. They have to learn more about smartphone, about some gadget and some application. So ETDA has served as a mentor for our farmer. In addition, when farmers enter the digital cycle, they would need the digital literacy to keep up with the media as well. And the CPB, my office, who has a responsibility on preventing consumers from scam, and the Digital Economy Promotion Agency, or we call DEPA, DEPA, who has a responsibility on leading our society and people to be the smart city. We are trying to organize a project to build digital literacy by set up the training workshop and build a chat room to transfer our people about the knowledge and raise the awareness for risk groups who are youth, elderly, and disability people. Next slide, please. For this slide is the last slide. I'd like to share about the collaboration on the digital literacy development between related agencies in Thailand. The digital literacy consists of keeping up with the media, be aware of the content of the impact of the media, being up to date with news or information, know and understand how to filter information to keep up with the digital in view that people of all ages must have skills. There is the ability not only children but also adults of all ages, because of the present technology media is changing rapidly. The media literacy, it's not about only school, but it's a daily way of life that we must have the skills to survive in the river of the information from all directions. parents or teachers don't even know what website or application that child is accessing. So media literacy is a personal skill that must be kept with creative benefits. In this regard, it's necessary to focus on teacher development. There must be a teacher's preparation and must plan how to develop teachers throughout the country to understand media literacy. But at this moment, we are not clear about the development of teachers in this area. This is one of our challenges in Thailand. However, we have heard the news that the Health Promotion Foundation, together with the Office of the Basic Education Commission and the Youth Media Institute, they organized an event of launching and disseminating a learning management manual for creating digital literacy citizens. It will be a start point for our country to raise up the digital literacy to our people, especially youth and children. In addition, OCPB office also has a network of agencies, whether it is a consumer protection club in an educational institution, high school, and university level. On the other hand, we also have cooperation with the Confederation of Consumer Protection Association, including the need of build cooperation with the Consumer Organization Council in the future to help driving in the promotion of digital knowledge for consumers at all ages in the future. That's all of my presentation. Next slide, please. That's all. Thank you very much for your attention.
And thank you very much to you, Dr. Wimondrat Teriyapirom. Let me pick up very, very briefly one audience question that has come in, and I'll have to ask for super short, just a couple of sentences answers, because in fact our window for this panel is just about at an end. But the question goes back to what we heard from Klaus Müller in regard to your appeal for the necessity of clear regulation on consumer protection. And the questioner points out that companies in Southeast Asia are collecting the personal data of their users, that companies, individuals, and government can all collect personal data. And the user and the questioner, who is Mr. Teguh Ariyanto from the University of Indonesia, asks whether governments in Southeast Asia need personal data protection laws. So, Monika Schnitzer, what would you say to that?
I think definitely we need this kind of protection, because collecting data is one thing, but then how you handle this data is another thing. And you need clear rules how to handle this data and what you can do with it. And in particular, the consumers have to be aware what kind of data they're providing and what it is used for. I mean, that's not just a question for Asia, it's a question for us too. In lots of cases, people are simply not aware what the data is used for.
Thank you very much. And Klaus Müller, you did present a very strong case for regulation, but how far do you think educational initiatives and voluntary codes can take us?
Well, they are important, and civil society and schools in Germany are engaged since many years in those activities. But they only help small steps, face it. It's a so complex world, and we have to move around in the digital world, the financial world, the health world, nutrition, and on and on. The other side of our great market society with the great variety of goods and services is just, it's impossible to have an overview. So education is necessary and important, but it will not reach us so far.
Thank you very much for that. And now to Dr. Wimondrat Teriyapirom, your point of view. We heard from our preceding speaker about both the question of whether the political will is there, but also limits on institutional capacity, on resources. Where would you see the governments of Southeast Asia in terms of moving toward enactment of regulation in the area of personal data protection? Do you think that is something that where the region is on the way?
Sorry, I cannot hear your question, the last sentence.
So it's simply the question of whether you think that, in fact, the Southeast Asian region is on the way to enacting this kind of data protection law.
Yes, for the data protection in Southeast Asia, in ASEAN, we work in the ACCP, so we focus in this point, but in many countries, we stuck in their policy disruption. We stuck in the, some kind like the policies, the political. So we cannot finish our project to focus on the privacy data. I would like to raise the issue in Thailand. We draft Data Privacy Act for a long time, very long time, 10 years. And now we want to amend it again. So it cannot finish now. But anyway, I think it's very important for our people. And we would like to launch some kinds of campaign to raise the awareness of our people for this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So clearly an ongoing process, but a very strong interest. Many thanks to all of our panelists from Panel One for this very interesting look at how we can raise awareness on the part of consumers, including especially vulnerable ones. And we want to now look at a different aspect of technology. We've heard a lot about how technology can be used to manipulate and deceive, but let us now talk about the way that technology can also make marketplaces easier to comprehend and compare, thereby empowering consumers and fundamentally improving transparency and reliability. Let us hear more from our Part 2 speakers. They are Mr. Christian Torun, who is founder and managing director of the Kahn Policy Institute here in Berlin and an expert on consumer protection who advises the German government, German state ministries, and the European Commission. And we also have with us Mr. Mohammed Hasman bin Haji Arim. He is working with the Department of Economic Planning and Statistics, DEPS, at Brunei's Ministry of Finance and Economy. And again, dear speakers, we're looking for TED-style presentations here, just about 7 minutes or less, if you would, please. And we begin with you. Mr. Torun, the floor is yours.
Melinda, thank you very much and welcome to everybody. And as Melinda has rightly said, we are discussing now the question of digitalization and what impact this has on consumers and consumer markets. And we were discussing the challenges that we saw. But now I would like to raise the question of whether we can use digital technologies to empower consumers. So next slide. The key question that I want to address now with my short presentation is, to what extent can and should digital technologies be used to empower consumers? Next slide. So if we look at the marketplace in the European context, then we will see that there are already plenty of digital tools, apps that empower consumers. And these fall within the section of information analysis tools, but also legal tech tools, privacy assisting tools, and so on and so forth. So I won't cover the legal tech tools today because this is something that you will be discussing tomorrow, but I just want to highlight that many of the tools that exist today fall within the category of legal tech tools. So now let us zoom into some of these tools and what they actually do to empower consumers. Next slide. So we learned today in all the discussions that digitalization brings with it many new opportunities when it comes to consumer information, but also many problems. For example, information overload. The fact that there's simply too much information for consumers to comprehend. So for example, there's one tool, CodeCheck, that assists consumers that are particularly interested in the ingredients of products, for example, cosmetic products or food products, and gives consumers much more comprehensible information and data about what ingredients these cosmetic products or food products have. So let us assume that you are allergic to something, then you can use this tool and it will raise your awareness, that you shouldn't eat it or shouldn't use this cosmetic product. Another challenge that we learned and discussed today quite often was misleading information or fake reviews on the internet, in particular, for example, at online retailers such as Amazon. So if you simply tell consumers, be aware of fake news, yeah, what should a consumer actually be doing? But there are tools such as Review Meter that you can simply type in the URL of the products that you found on Amazon, and this tool will analyze the reviews that are presented there and give an assessment of whether it's fake news or not fake news, and what the real average score of the reviews is if you exclude those reviews that the tool deems to be not really to be fake reviews. So a tool that assists consumers in identifying fake reviews. Another example is, for example, when it comes to financial decision-making, we all know that this is a totally difficult topic when it comes about numbers, and you need to kind of summarize your income and your spendings and so on and so forth. So there is a household planner provided by one of the German consumer organizations that helps consumers to track their spendings and identify saving potentials. So these are just 3 examples of consumer information digital technologies that assist consumers to improve consumer information. The second use case, next slide, is on privacy and data security. As we also discussed a number of times already today, privacy and data security are key issues in the digital markets. But one of the examples that we already discussed today is how should you as a consumer know which weather information app is actually privacy friendly and good to use or not? I'm not an expert, so how should I know? So great that we have a service provided by Mobile Secure, Mobile Sicher, that offers an app checker that reviews Android apps. So you can go to this tool and it will say you, okay, within the category of whatever, in what weather information systems, there are these and these kind of apps, and they have the following privacy score. So you can take your decision based on this, and you don't need to get an expert in privacy. When it comes to websites, often you wonder, is this website actually secure? Can I actually use it? Can I trust the security features of this website? I don't know. I'm not an expert in security of internet websites. So I can use this service, which is provided as a security score, and type in the URL, and it will tell me whether this website seems to be secure or not. Another issue that we also discussed today is the problem of online tracking. So if you say, I don't want to be tracked when I browse and surf online, so what can you do? Either you become an expert in kind of changing your privacy settings on your browser, or you install a tool, Privacy Badger, here's the example, that automatically learns to block invisible trackers and takes this responsibility from your shoulders. So just 2 areas in which digital tools can assist consumers and empower them to act responsibly in the internet. Next slide. And I believe there's still so much more potential when it comes to consumer protection technologies or consumer enhancing and empowering technologies. Let us assume that we have a voice assistant service that I can simply ask, hey, look, I have a problem with this retailer. What rights do I have? Oh, I have these rights. Great. In my particular situation, what would you recommend me to do? And this voice assistant could be provided by private consumer organizations or a market authority, and it could draw its knowledge from legal and from laws and rulings, recommendations of consumer organizations, and so on and so forth. So I believe there's still much room for improvement, for much more new ways in which to empower consumers by means of digital technologies. So let me come to the final slide. So the main takeaways. I believe that consumer enabling technologies should be one strategic element to empower consumers. But, this is the second lesson, they do not replace market regulation, enforcement, and classical offline empowerment strategies such as information raising campaigns, school education, and so on and so forth. But they are to be considered to be complementary. They go on top of what exists already today. Third, the potential of consumer enabling technologies is by far not yet leveraged. And consumer enabling technologies can empower consumers directly, but also indirectly when consumer enabling technologies are used, for example, by market authorities to get a better market scan or to use algorithms to check for unfair trading practices and so on and so forth. So these technologies could and should be used by consumer organizations as well as market authorities. So in sum, governments should have a strategy to support the development of consumer enabling technologies and invest in research and development in this field. And finally, we conducted a study on these topics. Next slide. Unfortunately, it's only in German, but if you are able to read German, then please have a look at it. It was financed by the Federal Ministry of Consumer Protection, and it summarizes some of the key ideas that I presented today. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Christian Torun. Very, very interesting indeed, and a lot of promising initiatives that you have showed to us. We move on now to an input from Mr. Mohammed Hasman bin Haji Alam, and you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Melinda. Hello, fellow speakers and colleagues, dearest audience. I will be sharing best practices on consumer enabling technology in Brunei, specifically the Smart Consumer mobile application. So we are quite excited to introduce the app and lots of things to talk about. We hope that this will be beneficial where you can consider in developing the SAM app as well. Can I have the next slide, please? So as you can see from the two graphs projected on screen, there is over 100% mobile penetration rate in Brunei, which indicate high users of smartphone, and each individual may have more than one mobile lines. According to e-commerce survey report, more and more people are now doing things online, which include online shopping, online banking, bill payment, and social networking. So this trend may pose risk to online consumers in Brunei. Hence, consumers need to be equipped with interactive and comprehensive information to protect themselves. Next slide, please. Looking at the evolving trend just now, we see high number of mobile users in Brunei. So it seems feasible to develop mobile application and to treat it as digital consumer information tool at that time. The Smart Consumer app was developed in November 2016, which aims to empower consumers through digital dissemination of consumer information to promote a smart consumer culture. This is in line with the direction to shift our focus from price control era to enhancing consumer welfare and making the market more efficient through stronger consumer protection regime and healthy competitive market. I will now briefly go through the features of the app. So first feature is consumer complaint, where consumers can lodge complaint conveniently anywhere at any time by just filling in necessary information and uploading copy of supporting documents. Next, our price comparison feature lists a compilation of market prices from retailers who participated voluntarily for selected popular household items. So with this feature, consumer will be able to compare prices between participating stores. You can also obtain information on shops that are conducting sales because all sales activities are notified to our department. Next, consumer protection and price control law information at your fingertips. You can easily familiarize the laws through the FAQ in the app, and timely updated maximum prices of price control goods to help consumers be able to identify whether the shop is selling above the maximum price set or not. So in summary, through this app, we want consumers to empower themselves and exercise their rights, particularly on right to compare, right to information, and right to seek for redress. Next slide, please. Within this app, we are feeding consumers with lots of consumer information, including the information on consumer protection law to enhance their understanding on the scope of the law, what the law can do for them, and how it can protect them from unfair business practices. And in light of the second wave of the pandemic in Brunei last month, we also issued an updated 2021 version of COVID-19 FAQ for both consumers and businesses on how they can solve issues between themselves during this difficult time due to the restrictions implemented by the government. Some of the topics covered include business obligations, consumers' responsibilities, price monitoring activities, event cancellation, and matters on classes and gym membership. Information on sales and discount, where users can have access to the dates and addresses of the participating branches. So this feature is quite popular when there is a national level sale. Consumers will be eager to check which of their favorite stores are having sales at that time. And just to highlight that, there are only specific items being price controlled, which are cooking oil, formulated powdered milk, rice, sugar, and energy products. Consumers can always check the updated maximum price in the app. Next slide, please. And moving on to consumer rights to compare, this is the key feature that we want users to use the most. This is to allow them to compare prices and make an informed purchase decision. So as you can see, there are 8 categories of items with selected popular products gathered from the household survey. So when user click the product, it will show you the price range, so you get a picture of the current market price. We will also be given average price to help you further. And another click will bring you to list of premises with their price. Then from there, you can make your own judgment based on the average price and your current location, whether it's worth your money to travel a bit further to get the cheapest or not. And apart from the price comparison feature, the app also provides price lists of items monitored by the department. For example, essential food items, including whole chicken, eggs, beef, onions, and chilies, where we saw a drastic increase in price back in November and December of last year, mainly due to the travel restrictions and weather conditions. And we also do monitor and publish prices of face masks and hand sanitizer. First is to promote price transparency, and secondly, to ensure that retailers are not taking advantage of the current situation and not selling these items at unreasonable price. Next, you might find it quite random and weird that the app also focuses on providing price information of car. However, taking into consideration the social and economic context, it's a long story short, car is considered as essential and a high value commodity in Brunei. So it is a public interest to get updated on car prices. Except for cars, prices mentioned earlier are all updated weekly. And moving on to the right to seek redress. So 11% of complaints received in 2021 are met via the app. It has been the top 3 most popular channel beside consumer hotline and email. As I mentioned earlier, users can conveniently use this lodging complaint feature to report any unfair practices encountered. Basically, you just need to fill in your details, company details, complaint statements, and just upload supporting documents such as payment receipts, photo of the product as a proof. Then you can click submit and you're done, and you'll be given a reference ticket number in case you want to follow up. Next slide, please. So on this last slide, I just want to share on some of the lessons learned and the key challenges we faced for the past 4 to 5 years since the app was introduced. The first issue is on resources and how to keep it alive. We do note that we need a dedicated team to look after this app, to promote this app, making sure people use it like a daily app, like we are using social media app every day, and avoiding people from uninstalling it. Next is competing with other apps that may have the same feature. For example, the consumer hotline app that also provide platform to lodge complaint via their app. And thirdly, we also been compiling feedbacks from users during our outreach sessions on what can be improved, and quite a few highlighted on user friendliness. Therefore, we have been working on the app upgrades, which expected to be completed by first quarter of next year. Some of the upgrades include layout facelift to enhance better user experience, providing more consumer information such as places of interest, restaurant with halal certificate and their cleanliness grade. We also added some important pages, including computation order, news and highlights, and smart consumer tips. And also based on the feedbacks, we will be adding functions like sorting and filtering to make it easier for user, especially when they want to compare prices. The upgrade will also allow for searching and giving product suggestion when on what they want to see in the app. And lastly, we also added a new setting where you can switch to Malay language. And before I end my presentation, allow me to share the key takeaways from this presentation. First, we are grateful that we were one of the first government offices to develop mobile application even before the government intensifies its fourth industrial revolution initiative. So we managed to see a significant growth of the smart consumer app users. The app is now surpassing the 30,000 download mark, which is quite a huge achievement here in Brunei. With the app, consumer welfare is enhanced through the price comparison and other relevant consumer information. Over the years, we also see an increasing number of formal and valid complaints received. This tick a box from our list, which we want consumers to be able to identify the right issues to be lodged and reporting to formal channels rather than through viral messages. So we believe the Smart Consumer app is one of the main drivers for this achievement. Consumers are now moderately empowered, I would say, and we take into consideration room for future improvements. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hazman bin Alim. We do have one audience question that's come in, but I'm going to request extremely brief answers, just 1 or 2 sentences, because in fact, we are a little bit over our time. The question is this, and it comes from Caroline Pratama from the GIZ, and it essentially goes back to what you could call the regulatory gap. We've heard several speakers, Christian Turun, Klaus Müller, in our first panel talking about how important it is to put regulatory frameworks into place, but we've also heard a number of speakers from Southeast Asia saying this is an ongoing process, but the region is not yet all the way there. So the question is this: coming to the issue of platform liability, how do you think this should be addressed in the face of a regulatory gap? Is there a chance for self-regulation initiatives from the platforms themselves? So Christian Turun, essentially that question about how far voluntary initiatives and codes of conduct can take us.
So first of all, when it comes to very fundamental issues of competition, I think that we need to have laws in place and enforcement. So you shouldn't leave it to the market and even self-regulatory instruments. But then beyond this, you cannot regulate everything in law. So when it comes to detailed stuff, you can use self-regulatory instruments, but here I would rather prefer co-regulatory instruments. So not just simply that some companies get together and develop something and then say, okay, this is something that we stick to, but that they develop it together with consumer associations, together with market authorities, establish a standard and impose not only a self-commitment, but also a monitoring mechanism, so to ensure that what they ever claim to be doing is actually monitored and then self-enforced. So self-regulation can be a complementary issue, but if it is done, it needs to be done in a transparent, multi-stakeholder process and with an enforcement mechanism.
Thank you very much for that point. And in fact, we are going to pick up on the importance of stakeholder cooperation in our closing panel tomorrow. So that's a great hint of what's in store. Let me just ask Mr. Hazman bin Alim to also please comment on that issue.
Sorry, what was the question?
The question was whether you see, in the absence of a fully detailed regulatory framework in place, how much room do you see for, and how effective is self-regulation by the platforms themselves?
Yeah, all right, thank you. First of all, I like to agree with the first speaker that on the core regulatory mechanism, and that both government and businesses and consumers are to work together. And government can also do much, but government can also do everything. So it's a whole nation of approach.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much to both of you for this look also at how technology can be part of the solution as well as being part of the problem. And both of you have emphasized, as have all of our speakers, the importance of international exchange. So just a quick word, dear ladies and gentlemen, as we do close our first day of this online conference about the participation that we're seeing today. We do have registered users, participants from 46 different countries, ranging literally from A to Z, from Australia to Zambia. And the geographical split, the regional split, is also quite interesting. We have about 30% of our participants coming from Asia, 30% from Europe, and 30% from other regions. So truly international indeed. Many thanks to both of you. Ladies and gentlemen, just a very, very quick wrap up. We have heard a lot today about the potential opportunities, but also the risks associated with the exponential expansion of e-commerce in Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia really leading the world in terms of the degree of expansion here. We've identified some very promising programs, initiatives, measures, and technologies for empowering online consumers by raising public awareness and digital literacy. And at the same time, we have heard from a number of speakers, as I just mentioned, that there really is no substitute for consumer protection, regulation, nor for redress in the form of access to justice when transactions go wrong. And that latter point is the one that we will be picking up when we reconvene tomorrow. Day 2 is going to begin with a look at so-called legal tech, at technologies that facilitate access to legal remedies for online consumers. And after that, we will move on to that interactive discussion that I just talked about on the role of different stakeholders, including civil society organizations, regulators, business, in shaping good digital governance. So many, many thanks to all of our speakers for this very informative and very wide-ranging first day. I wish all of you a great afternoon or evening, and I thank our audience for their attention and their participation. And looking forward to seeing you back here tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. German time. See you then.